The series Land Rover and Defender are over 60 years old, and this year production will sadly come to an end. So I visited Isla in the Hebrides to step back in time and see how this iconic car changed, or actually didn't change, over the years. But how did it all start? So after World War II, Rover faced a bit of a problem. You see, people weren't going to be buying luxury saloon cars because no one had any cash. And Rover had this huge workforce that it had amassed during the war effort, so it needed to come up with a new product. So the bosses, they thought, why don't we do something like the Willys Jeep, only British, better built, easier to drive and cheaper. And so the Land Rover was born. The name Land Rover was actually first coined here on Isla. Spencer Wilkes, who was the chairman of the Rover company, had an estate on the island and he used an old Rover on jacked up suspension to drive over the fields, a vehicle his gamekeeper nicknamed the Land Rover. And a few years later, when the firm decided to produce a proper off-road vehicle, this name seemed perfect. So production of the Land Rover started in 1948. And the car was built on a ladder frame steel chassis with an aluminium body. Actually, the design hasn't changed all that much to the modern day Defender. And it feels quite a rudimentary car to drive. This is what later became known as the Series 1. And this is a 1954 model year. So it's got a 2-litre petrol engine with around 50 horsepower. It's on leaf spring suspension. We've got selectable all-wheel drive. So when you're in high range mode, you have to press a lever to go into 4-wheel drive mode. Oh, there is no synchromesh, as you probably just heard, on first or second gear. And yeah, to drive it's interesting, shall we say. But once you get the hang of it, it's definitely got a certain charm to it. So I'm now in a Series 2 Land Rover, and it was introduced in 1958, and generally, mechanically, it was very similar to the Series 1. However, externally, it was quite different. So the body now had a shoulder line, so it has that distinctive Defender shoulder line that we're used to on the current car. Inside, it had a bit more space, low capacity was up as well. And there's some mod cons as well. You could get it with door cards as an option, you could get it with door mirrors as an option, and it was designed to be a little bit more user-friendly for the farmers that drove these things. In 1971, the Series 3 Land Rover was introduced, and one of the big changes was that it got a fully synchro-meshed gearbox, so it was easier to drive. Also, there's some changes inside. For instance, the speedometer and the instruments were moved in front of the driver. You also got this soft touch dash. Now, there's actually an interesting reason why that's there. You see, for German legislation, Land Rover had to fit a crash bar across the front bulkhead, and so they decided they wanted to cover this up, and they did that by fitting this dash. There's a similar story to the outside of the car as well, because traditionally the Land Rover had its headlamps in the middle of the grille. But for Belgian legislation, they were moved to the outside of the wings. This particular car I'm driving is a 109 station wagon. It's a 1980 car, and it's powered by a 2.25 litre petrol engine with around 78 brake horsepower. You could also get a 2.25 litre diesel engine, and there was an optional straight 6 engine. Actually, towards the end of this car's life, they introduced a V8 model. Now, the V8 engine, in order to fit that, they had to lengthen the engine base slightly, so the grille moved flush with the wings, and that design was actually carried over to the later generation of Land Rover. In 1983, the Land Rover was updated again. The 110 was introduced, and then the following year, in 1984, there was the shorter wheelbase 90, and there were some big changes. For instance, out with the old leaf springs and in came new coil springs taken from the Range Rover, and the result was to massively improve the comfort both on and off-road. The car also got disc brakes, and yeah, when you brake this car, it stops like a car should. Much different than the Series 3, which is just, well, you have to leave quite a bit of distance for stopping. Other changes include the engines. You've got a 2.5 litre petrol or diesel, and obviously the V8s were available throughout the range. Another interesting thing is that this particular car is very rare indeed. It's one of only two 40th anniversary models built. It was built in 1987 to celebrate obviously 40 years of the Land Rover. But the then boss of Rover had a change of heart and thought, oh no, we don't want to be looking at the past, that's stupid. We only care about building for the future. And it's kind of ironic that we're here today on this trip, driving all these old Land Rovers to look at the history. In 1990, the Defender name was introduced, and that's because the Land Rover Discovery was about to be launched and the company didn't want any confusion. Although the vehicle was pretty much identical to the 90 and 110 which went before it. In fact, it wasn't really until 2007 that the car got a major update. So you got some different exterior trim, but more notably the interior was redesigned and made a lot more user-friendly. This particular car I'm driving now, it's a heritage model. It's a run-out limited edition car to celebrate the 60 plus years that the Defender and its ancestors have been in production. And it features specialist green paint, which was seen on the original Series 1 Land Rover. And it also has little badges on with the number plate from that vehicle. And it's really quite interesting driving this like end of the line car and comparing it to the old Series 1 from earlier on. I mean, it's night and day. Even though the cars look similar, you can see the resemblance. It's just so vastly different to drive. Yet there is still some commonality. For instance, the chassis there's certain dimensions of it which are similar to the Series 1. Obviously that's going to change with the new model that's coming out, the new Defender, the replacement, and then a whole new chapter in the Land Rover history will begin. Click on the video windows to watch our history lesson on the Range Rover or our review of the new Discovery Sport. Click the play icon for our latest video and on our logo to subscribe.